jubilee, while your joyous strains prolong. What the gladsome tidings be, which inspire your heavenly song. In excelsis Deo, in excelsis Deo. Come to Bethlehem and see him whose birth the angels sing. Come adore on bended knee, Christ the Lord, the newborn King. In excelsis Deo, in excelsis Deo. See within a manger laid Jesus, Lord of heaven and earth. Mary, Joseph, lend your aid. With us sing our Savior's birth. In excelsis Deo, in excelsis Deo, in excelsis Deo.
welcome you to this service on Christmas Day, and we are thrilled that you are joining us online and on YouTube. As we celebrate Christmas today, we hear from the Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter, these words that describe the incarnation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all the people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.'" From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. This is the word of joy. Thanks be to God. One Christmas, when I was serving as an associate pastor in downtown Macon at Mulberry Street Methodist Church, as I was making my way on the way to the church, it happened to be on a Sunday that Christmas had fallen as it has this year. There had been, of course, a glorious Christmas Eve service the night before, with children, joy, and all the wonderful elements that make for a gorgeous candlelight service. I have to admit I was a little weary in my bones, and I looked forward to a quieter morning service on that Christmas morning. It seemed in my heart that most of the pressures were off now, and as usual, as you would expect on a Christmas Day morning, even as it was on a Sunday, the streets were somewhat deserted. Most families were at home. They were maybe sleeping in late, or maybe they were sitting around in their pajamas opening their presents. My normal drive took me over the overpass there before I got to the exit to arrive at the church. And as I approached that exit, a very interesting sight caught my attention. It made me look a second time. There was a pink aluminum Christmas tree, about 3 feet high, set on a small triangular littered patch of grass between the bridge and the on-ramp to the freeway. There, amidst all the detritus and trash and dirt and grime of a downtown inner-city overpass, was this tree, a sign of joy. It made me smile, and it tore at my heart, for I knew that it belonged to the homeless, to those who made their home the underpass there at that interstate. The church was only a few blocks away, and as I made my way over to it, I kept thinking about the homeless, and with the fact that in the midst of all their desolation, there was this pink aluminum tree that had been rescued from the side of a road somewhere and placed there as a sign of their own celebration of Christmas joy. The light shines in the darkness, John says today, and the darkness did not overcome it. Today is Christmas Day, and there are 12 more days of it, I remind you. Christmas is not just a day. It is a season, and moreover, Christmas is a way of life. We often hear persons say, quote, now that the Christmas season is coming to a close, when Christmas isn't coming to a close. Christmas Day is only the beginning of Christmas. And yet we continue that so often is in our minds as that which needs to be taken care of, packed away, swept up with all the remains of our Christmas Day joy. But that is truly not the nature, you see, of a living word such as this today. We are in the midst of our Christmas celebration. While many persons maybe have already exchanged their gifts, most packages might have already been opened, with the exception of a few that are awaiting on the arrival of someone who hasn't come to town yet. It seems that already we are packing Christmas away in our minds and in our hearts as we move past the frantic crush and the push that have marked the days of shopping. We're being reminded today of another opportunity of what truly is at the heart of why we are here today. And we hear it in this gospel lesson. The gospel according to St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's the way John's gospel begins. In the beginning. You see, this is John's version of the nativity story. We don't hear about shepherds or angels or the babies wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger. You see, in this nativity story, in this Christmas story, John takes us back to the very beginning of history. He is echoing the opening words of the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. God moved over the chaos and darkness and said, "Let there be light." And here was John in his gospel. From the very beginning was the Logos, or Greek for word, the Word. The God who moved over the face of the deep, the Creator God who moved over darkness, who spoke and said, "Let there be light." This very same God who was from the very beginning and spoke that word is the same God who has become flesh and blood and is dwelling amongst us. John says, what has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light, John says, shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. You see, this is living word. This God who takes on our flesh doesn't ignore the darkness, but he shines in the midst of it. Just like that pink aluminum tree off the interstate in downtown Macon, reminding us in the midst of the chaos of this world and all that is unsettled and all that is painful, there is still joy. William Sloane Coffin, the great preacher of Riverside Church in New York City for decades, has a wonderful book called The Courage of Love. And in that book, he reminds us that joy, as we sing of it, as we've already sung of it, as we've sung joy to the world, that joy is not the absence of pain, that when we go back to the nativity story, it had to be the case that Mary suffered pain in the birthing of the Christ. She knew pain, and a pain that would be echoed over and over again in her life, and most especially as she stood eventually at the foot of the cross. And you see that joy that enabled her, that light that shone forth in spite of the darkness, is the true nature of living word. It is the true nature of what Christmas is all about. Christmas isn't what it was when I was a child, and it never will be again. I'm an adult, and it's different. In these challenging days that we find ourselves in, when people are struggling economically, when they're unsure of what the future holds, perhaps maybe some of us have not been able to do what we would like to have done for Christmas. There are husbands and wives, sons and daughters, fathers and mothers who are serving this morning in harm's way in our military. And they're not with their families this Christmas. There are those who are facing illness or dealing with the grief of a loved one, as we've seen just this week in this congregation. And the sorrow that they know in these moments seems to be intensified as all the memories of Christmas past rush over them. There may be persons who will be very happy to have Christmas done and over. With the true nature of Christmas, the true nature of Christmas joy is living word, a word that lives far beyond a day on the calendar, far beyond a season in the Christian calendar. It lives and it gives light even in the face of darkness. When I was visiting a local hospital once before Christmas, I stopped at the front desk to find out the room number of a patient that I was to visit. There was a lovely lady sitting at the desk, and she was talking with another hospital employee. They stopped their conversation to give me the room number, and when they realized that I was a minister, one of them said, "Can you believe that?" And she pointed to the nativity scene on the desk counter. It took me a moment to take in what they were talking about. Somebody stole Jesus. Can you believe that? And as I looked carefully at it, in fact, Jesus was missing. There was Mary. There was Joseph, there were the shepherds, there was a donkey, there were sheep, but there was no Jesus. I kind of snickered to myself because it reminded me of the nativity scene that I had seen a few years ago that was missing one piece. 1 out of 40-something, missing the baby Jesus. Again, she said, "Somebody stole Jesus right off this counter. Can you believe that?" I really didn't know what to say, but I thought for a moment and I said, "Well, I guess somebody just took Jesus out of Christmas." They stared back at me. So I tried again. Maybe Jesus is out in the halls of this hospital, though. Maybe he's making rounds, going from room to room. Maybe he'll come back when he's done. Maybe the person who took Jesus really needed Jesus. I don't think they really appreciated my message. And I finally said, "Well, let's hope that they bring him back soon." And I went on my way. During these next days, these 12 days of Christmas, amidst all the things that will be pulling at us, we're reminded, we're called back to where we're supposed to be focused, where our hearts truly belong, to celebrate the mystery of what God did in becoming flesh and blood and joyously receiving him as we should, as Christ among us, the Word made flesh, the living Word. The Word, my brothers and sisters, that gives life and breath and hope to us all. I pray that you know today of the power and the nature of the celebration that we are all about. Celebrating living Word, taking on our form, our substance, our flesh, and becoming human. In this season in which we give gifts, in this season that pulls at our hearts and tugs at our heartstrings, let us remember the most precious gift the Creator has given us. In the midst of the gifts of the sun and the moon, this good earth with all of its blessings of sky and water and plants and animals, the incredible gift of life itself, of flesh and blood, of breath and memory, this day, this moment, this Christmas, even with its joy and its sorrow, all of it together, means for us that we're called to be fully sons and daughters of the living Word. And above all, let us remember this, that the gift of the Word made flesh was sent to save us, to heal us, to bring us joy, and to help us know that Jesus is not missing. Jesus is at work all around us, because Jesus lives. He is living Word. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Merry Christmas, not just for this day, but for every day.